Reality Case Studies, Season 2, Jesse, Lally, and Michelle Saniei from the Valley. Episode 3, Team Jesse or Team Michelle. How a Divorce Recruits an Army. Triangulation, loyalty binds, and the psychology of taking sides. Somewhere right now, a friend group is splitting in two. It might be over a divorce, a falling out, a family estrangement, or a fight nobody can quite explain anymore. But the shape is always the same. Two people are in conflict, and slowly, one by one, everyone around them is being pulled to a side. Whose story do you believe? Who do you still text? Who do you invite, knowing the other one can't come now? On the Valley, we watched this happen to Jesse, Lally, and Michelle Saniei in the most public way imaginable, with cameras rolling and a whole cast of friends being asked, in effect, to choose. Team Jesse or Team Michelle. And here's what I want you to understand by the end of today. That pull you feel to pick a side is not a character flaw, and it's not really about them. It's one of the oldest and most predictable patterns in all of human relationships, and it has a name. Today, we're going to learn it, so the next time a conflict tries to recruit you into its army, you'll see it coming. Welcome back to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. If you're new here, my name is Stephanie Buckley. I'm an AMFT, parenting strategist and family systems coach who specializes in ADHD and OCD, executive functioning challenges, emotional regulation, and the patterns that keep families stuck in the same arguments on repeat. I'm also a mom to a thriving 23-year-old neurodivergent son with ADHD and OCD, and I've been married for over 3 decades. I created this podcast because I remember how confusing parenting felt when my son was younger. I remember watching behaviors that didn't make sense and wondering whether what I was seeing was attitude, laziness, defiance, or something else entirely. What I eventually learned, both through my professional work and my own kitchen table experience, is that many behaviors we interpret as intentional are actually rooted in how the brain processes stress, frustration, and executive functioning demands. This podcast exists to translate what is happening neurologically, psychologically, and relationally so that you can move from constant conflict to collaboration. I'm a solution-focused therapist who utilizes Bowen family systems theory to help people understand the patterns running through their family system. Today, we continue Season 2 of Reality Case Studies, following Jesse, Lally, and Michelle Saniei from Bravo's The Valley. In Episode 1, we looked at the grief of watching an ex move on. In Episode 2, we went back into the marriage itself, to the slow fade and the money that quietly pulled them apart. Today, we zoom out from the couple to the whole friend group, because a divorce is rarely just about two people. It becomes a community event, and the way a community handles it reveals some of the most fascinating and universal patterns in all of psychology. This is the episode about sides. If this is the first episode of mine you've ever found, welcome. And let me tell you quickly what this series is. Reality Case Studies uses publicly available reality television as a teaching tool. A case study is one of the oldest ways we learn psychology. You take one story, study it closely, and the concepts stick in a way they never do from a dry definition. We use stories we all watch together because it is far easier to see a pattern clearly in someone else's life than in your own. And once you can recognize it on a screen, you can start to catch it in your own home. That distance is the whole point of this series. And here is the promise I make in every single episode. This is a case study, not a diagnosis. I am not diagnosing Jesse, Michelle, or anyone else in their orbit, and I never will. A real diagnosis requires hours of assessment, a full history, and a genuine relationship with a client, and none of that exists here. I have never met or assessed anyone featured on The Valley. What I do instead is describe patterns, the observable dynamics anyone can see, and then the part that separates a case study from gossip, we turn every single pattern back toward our own lives. So today, I am especially not going to tell you who was right and who was wrong. or who belonged on which team. That's the one thing I'll refuse to do, because the entire lesson of this episode is that the pull to assign teams is itself the pattern we're here to understand. If you finish today thinking about your own family, your own friend group, the last time you got pulled into a conflict that wasn't yours, then we've done our work. Let's begin with the single most important idea in this entire episode, a concept that comes straight from Bowen Family Systems theory, the framework at the heart of my work. The concept is triangulation. Let me define it simply, because once you understand triangulation, you will see it everywhere for the rest of your life. Triangulation is what happens when two people in a relationship are experiencing tension. And instead of resolving it directly between the two of them, they pull in a third person to stabilize the discomfort. The two-person system, which is wobbly and anxious, becomes a three-person system, which feels more stable, at least temporarily. Here's why this happens, and it's rooted in something very basic about human anxiety. A relationship between two people is inherently unstable when there's tension, because all of the discomfort sits squarely between them, with nowhere else to go. Bowen observed that the smallest stable unit of an emotional system is not the pair, it's the triangle. So when the anxiety between two people gets too high, the nervous system reaches for a third point to spread the tension out. Think of how naturally this happens. You have a frustrating disagreement with your partner, and what's the first thing you do? You call your best friend or your mother and tell them all about it. In that moment, you have triangulated. You've taken a two-person tension and pulled in a third person to help you hold it. And here's the thing, a little bit of this is completely normal and even healthy. We all vent. We all seek support. Triangulation becomes a problem when the third person is used as a substitute for solving the actual issue, or worse, when the third person is recruited as an ally, an army, a weapon. So where is the line between healthy support and destructive triangulation? It's a crucial distinction, and I want to make it clear. Healthy support sounds like this. You talk to a trusted friend to process your feelings, to feel less alone, and to get clarity so you can go back and address the real relationship directly. The goal is regulation and insight. The friend is a resource, not a recruit. Destructive triangulation sounds different. Its goal is not clarity, it's alliance. The purpose becomes building a case, gathering people to your side, and establishing who is right and who is wrong in the court of public opinion. In destructive triangulation, the third person is not there to help you resolve the conflict, they're there to help you win it. In a divorce, especially one that plays out inside a tight friend group, this dynamic can go into overdrive. Each person in the couple, hurting and destabilized, reaches out to the shared friends, not always to heal, but sometimes to be believed, to be validated, to be chosen. And the friends, who care about both people and are anxious themselves about the conflict, get pulled into the triangle. The natural human tendency to want to help, to take a side, to make the ambiguity stop, becomes the very mechanism that turns a private rupture into a public war. Nobody necessarily plans this. It's the system doing what anxious systems do, spreading the tension across as many points as it can find. Now let's talk about what this feels like for the people being pulled. Because if you've ever been the friend caught between two people you love, you already know it's one of the most uncomfortable positions in human relationships. There's a term for it, a loyalty bind, sometimes called a loyalty conflict. A loyalty bind is the painful psychological state of feeling that caring for one person requires betraying another. You love them both. But the atmosphere around the conflict makes it feel like there's no way to stay close to one without being disloyal to the other. Every text, every invitation, every kind word toward one person feels like it will be read as a vote against the other. Loyalty binds create genuine internal distress because they violate something deep in us, the desire to be a good, fair, caring person to everyone we love. When you're in a loyalty bind, You often feel guilty no matter what you do. Reach out to one friend, guilt. Reach out to the other, guilt. Try to stay neutral, and now you feel like you're failing both of them and being a coward on top of it. This is why people in a friend group navigating a divorce often report feeling exhausted, anxious, and even resentful of the couple without fully understanding why. Their nervous systems are trapped in an impossible equation the conflict handed them, one with no correct answer. And here is where, as a family systems coach, I have to slow us down and speak with great care, because there is one person in a divorce who experiences the loyalty bind more acutely than any friend ever could, and that is the child. Jesse and Michelle share a young daughter. Now, I want to be clear that I have no knowledge whatsoever of how they handle their co-parenting privately. And there is genuine reason to believe many parents work hard to protect their children from exactly this. But this episode would be incomplete if I did not name the pattern, because it is the one that matters most, far beyond this or any celebrity story. When a child is triangulated into their parents' conflict, whether through overt pressure to choose or through the subtler channels of overheard arguments, loaded comments about the other parent, or simply absorbing a parent's emotional state, the child is placed in a loyalty bind that is developmentally impossible for them to resolve. Here's why it's so damaging. A young child's identity is literally built from both parents. The child experiences themselves as half one parent and half the other. So when a child is asked, even implicitly, to take a side against one parent, they are being asked to take a side against a part of themselves. This is why children caught in high conflict divorces so often develop anxiety, guilt, and confusion that they cannot name. Their nervous system is being asked to hold a contradiction it was never designed to hold. In Bowen theory, we would say the child has been triangulated to stabilize the adult's anxiety, and the cost of that stabilization is paid by the youngest, most vulnerable person in the system. If you take one thing from this entire episode as a parent, let it be this. The single most protective thing a divorcing parent can do is keep the child out of the triangle. Let the child love both parents freely. Their psychological health depends on it more than almost anything else. Let's turn now to the friends, the cast, the audience, all of us, and ask an honest question. Why is it so easy to pull people into a side? Why do we, as observers, feel that magnetic urge to decide who's the good one and who's the bad one? The answer lies in a few deep features of how the human mind works. And understanding them is how you free yourself from them. The first is something psychologists call splitting, a concept that describes the mind's tendency, especially under stress, to sort people into all good and all bad categories. Splitting is comforting because it resolves ambiguity, and the human brain finds ambiguity genuinely stressful. It is far easier to hold the thought, he's the villain and she's the victim, or the reverse, than it is to hold the far more accurate and far more uncomfortable truth that two flawed, hurting, complicated people both contributed to a painful ending, and both have moments that look sympathetic and moments that don't. Splitting turns a confusing human tragedy into a simple story with a hero and a villain, and simple stories are easier for our nervous systems to digest. But they are almost always false. The second feature is the narrative bias, our love of a clean story. Humans are storytelling creatures. We crave a coherent narrative with a clear protagonist, a clear antagonist, and a clear moral. Reality television is engineered to feed exactly this craving, because a story with heroes and villains is more compelling than a story about two ordinary people whose love ran out. But real relationships almost never fit that template. And when we force them into it, we lose the truth in exchange for the satisfaction of a tidy tale. And the third is the fundamental attribution error, which we've touched on before in this series. This is the mind's tendency, when we judge someone else to attribute their behavior to their character rather than their circumstances. So when we watch one person snap, we conclude they're simply a bad or cold person without seeing the hours of context, exhaustion, and history that shaped that single moment. Editing removes the circumstances and leaves only the behavior, which makes the fundamental attribution error almost impossible to resist. Put splitting, narrative bias, and the fundamental attribution error together, and you have a mind that is practically begging to pick a team, knowing that is the beginning of not having to. So what's the alternative? If picking a side is so natural, what are we supposed to do instead when someone we love is in conflict? This is where Bowen offers one of the most useful ideas in all of family systems work, the concept of the non-anxious presence and its close cousin, staying differentiated. To be a non-anxious presence is to remain caring and connected to both people without absorbing their anxiety and without being pulled into the role of judge, ally, or weapon. It is the friend who can say, with warmth and without betrayal, I love you, I'm here for you, and I'm not going to be a part of building a case against someone else you once loved. That is not fence-sitting, and it is not cowardice. It is one of the hardest and most mature emotional skills a person can develop, because it requires tolerating the discomfort of the loyalty bind without collapsing it by choosing a side. Staying differentiated, a term we've used throughout this series, means holding on to your own values and your own steadiness, even when the emotional pressure of the group is pushing you to react, to align, to pick. In a friend group being torn in two by a divorce, the differentiated friend is the one who keeps loving both people, refuses to carry messages between them, declines to be the repository for the campaign against the other, and quietly models that it is possible to care about someone without enlisting in their war. Those people are rare, and they are the ones who often keep a community from tearing itself apart. You can be that person. In your own family, in your own friend group, you can be the one who refuses to be triangulated. Now we turn the camera around, gently, toward your own life, because triangulation is not a celebrity phenomenon. It is running through your family, your friendships, and possibly your workplace right now. So sit with these questions and remember, notice, don't judge. Think about the conflicts in your own family of origin. When two people in your family were in tension, who got pulled in as the third point? Were you ever that third point? Many of us grew up as the child who carried messages between parents, or who became one parent's confidant against the other, or who was the peacemaker whose job was to absorb everyone's anxiety. If that was you, notice how naturally you may still step into the middle of other people's conflicts today because that triangle was your childhood training. And think about your friendships now. Is there a conflict you've been pulled into where, if you're honest, you're being recruited rather than simply supported? What would it look like to love both people without being anyone's army? And if you are co-parenting, or if you grew up in a divided home, this one deserves the most tenderness. Reflect honestly, without shame, on whether any child in your life is being asked, even subtly, to hold a loyalty bind. And if you were that child once, know that the confusion and guilt you may have carried was never yours to carry. You were triangulated into something far too big for you, and understanding that now is part of how the pattern stops with you. Before we close, I'd like to invite you to slow down with me for just a moment. This is the Path to Peace pause, where we gently turn the focus away from someone else's story and toward our own. Here are the 2 questions I want you to carry with you this week. Question 1. In your family growing up, when 2 people were in conflict, who became the third point of the triangle? And do you still find yourself stepping into that same role in your relationships today? Question 2. Think of a conflict happening around you right now, in your family, your friend group, or at work. Are you being invited to support someone or to enlist against someone? And what would it look like to stay a caring, non-anxious presence to everyone involved without picking a team. Sit with those. And if you'd like to go deeper, I'd love to invite you to join me inside the Path to Peace Therapy Companion Journal on Patreon and Substack. The links can be found in the show notes. In this week's Companion Journal, we'll map the triangles in your own family of origin, identify the loyalty binds you may still be carrying, work through a guided exercise on becoming a non-anxious presence, and, for the parents among us, build a concrete plan for keeping the children in your life out of the triangle. The public podcast introduces the psychology. The Companion Journal is where you begin applying it to your own life. You'll find the link in today's show notes. Think of reality case studies as the doorway. Once we've introduced a concept through a real-world example, you can continue learning by exploring the deeper episodes in my library of over 160 episodes, all linked below. If this episode helped you see a triangle you've been caught in, that awareness alone is powerful because you cannot step out of a pattern you cannot see. But once you see it, you always have a choice. Next time on Reality Case Studies Season 2, Reality Case Studies Season 2, Lally and Michelle Saniei from the Valley. Episode 4, The Child Caught in the Middle. Is it the divorce or the conflict? What actually harms and protects children when parents split? We turn toward the child at the center of it all and ask what high-conflict divorce does to a young nervous system and what the research actually says protects children through it. We'll explore loyalty binds, co-regulation, and the difference between the divorce itself and the conflict around it. One more time, because it matters. This episode is educational. It is not a psychological evaluation, diagnosis, or treatment recommendation for anyone featured, and it is not a substitute for professional mental health care. If today's themes are ones you're living, please reach out to a licensed professional in your area. You can find every episode, the companion journals, and more at thepathtopecetherapy.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at thepathtopecetherapy and connect with me on LinkedIn and Pinterest. Take a deep breath, give yourself some grace, and remember, understanding the patterns is the first step. Practicing something healthier is what changes the story. You got this, and I've got you.